Good afternoon, everyone, and morning for those of you who are not wherever I am in standard time, whatever it's called, Eastern Standard Time. I'm Scott Allen Davis. I am the Director of Energy Access and Equity for SEEL LLC. This is our fourth webinar for 2021. I cannot believe we at the end of a year already, and 2 years into this, what we call a nightmare pandemic around here, but we are. And I'm so excited about the topic today and for the amazing panelists that we have to discuss this topic. I'm grateful for all of you who are here. If you have questions, please drop them into the chat. But today we are here to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in action. Over the past 4 or 5 years or so, this topic has bubbled up in a way that I've never imagined. People who've never had positions in as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm also adding justice in there as well. Never talked about it, never looked at it, never explored it, but everybody is popping up with positions and different things that are happening. And so the question has been in my mind, what are these people doing in these positions? How is it changing the culture? What is happening? How is this really infiltrating the workspace, particularly as we talk about the space within the energy efficiency, energy waste reduction, energy optimization, however you look at it, how is it impacting and how is it working? So that is what we'll be talking about today, very candidly. I'm very passionate about this topic, as well as our panelists who are here, and they're very perspectives and things that we need to look at and things that we really need to think about. So this isn't an hour, hey, it's not like a sitcom or a show where at the end that's going to be wrapped up with a fancy Christmas bow. This is really something to empower you to move forward and to think about and then look at how you can change what you do individually to impact what you do corporately. So very excited about this conversation. And we are going to now meet our amazing panelists. So I'm going to start with Danny. If you could introduce yourself, your title, and share with you your pronouns. And by the way, I'm he, him, his. So off to you, Danny.
Okay. Okay. My name is Danny Kawmoku. Thank you, first of all, so much for inviting me to this panel. I'm really excited to share space with everybody who's on the call today. Again, Danny Kawmoku. I am a senior diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist with ICF, which is a management consulting firm. It's a global firm. My pronouns are she, her, and I always like to acknowledge as well the land that I'm on. So I am currently living and working on the land of the Clackamas, the Cowlitz, and the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde people, and that is also known as Portland, Oregon. So again, so happy to be here, and thank you so much.
I'm so happy to have you here, and thanks, Danny, for that. I'm going to now kick off to Quinn.
Hello, everyone. My name is Quinn Parker. I am the CEO of InColor. InColor is a consultancy dedicated to exploring diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, specifically around energy. I go by she, her.
Thank you, Quinn, and I'm so happy to have you here. Next, Tanya, if you could introduce yourself. Oh, and by the way, Quinn is in Las Vegas.
I am. I'm in Las Vegas.
We're all over the country. Yeah, I'm so excited about this. Go ahead, Tanya.
Everyone, really excited to be here as well. My name is Tanya Kozlowski. She, her pronouns, and I am joining you from East Lansing, Michigan, which is, among other tribes, the historic lands of the Ottawa and Peoria Native peoples. So I am today representing sort of two organizations. First, and more my day job is that I'm a senior fellow at the National Association of Utility Regulatory Commissioners, and that is a national, by the name, organization out of Washington, D.C., but we support decision making and just education and bringing together state utility regulators across the country on a variety of issues that may come before them. I am also the co-founder and a facilitator for an organization called AWARE, which stands for Advancing White Anti-Racist Education. And we hold what are called affinity groups, or those who are white identified, to have conversations about race and how, helping people both understand race from an external perspective, but really more importantly, from an internal perspective, and understanding where race impacts their lives and society as a whole, helping folks understand the existence of systemic racism. So again, really glad to be here and look forward to the conversation.
I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you, Tanya. And last but definitely not least, Maria, if you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi. I am also very excited to be here. My name is Maria Tamburi, and I am the Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Employee Engagement at Dominion Energy. And I'm physically here in Richmond, Virginia, and my pronouns would be she, her. And I'm really looking forward to talking to all of you, and what a great group of people to have this great discussion on an issue that it is so important as we move through this journey, and everything that you said, Scott. It's a really important issue that we need to be thinking about every day.
Thank you. And so, Maria, you really kind of just did a good transition, because I want to start off with, before we talk about what work we've seen happen and what lessons we've learned, why is this work important? And so I'm going to start with Tanya. Why do you think within the energy space, or any space, but specifically energy, is the work of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice important?
I want to start by acknowledging your addition of justice into the description of what we should be talking about, because to me, that's fundamentally what we're talking about.
Thank you.
And the other words are just, something that are utilized on top of that. And I think at times to maybe mitigate the discomfort with talking about it as a justice issue. Mm-hmm. But it's important in the energy space because it's really one of the elements of society where those who have, whether it's racism, or classism, has led to the burdens of the development of the energy system in this country, have fallen on those, either people of color or people of low income, that end up dealing with the impacts of pollution, of fossil fuel plants, and among other things that bring, pollution and environmental degradation to communities, but are left out of the conversation, which I think is such an important part of what we're going to be talking about today, of what really that energy system should look like, mm-hmm. and engaging people. But so they have not had an opportunity to be at the table, are often less resourced to be able to fight against things that happen in their communities that they don't agree with. And another reason that this is important is that the energy system is changing so much and so quickly right now, that ensuring we are recognizing the historic both actions and impacts that have taken place, so that we can choose an intentional and different path forward to maybe not be able to fully remedy the harms through this system, but at least acknowledge them and do things differently, so that everyone is treated fairly and bear the burdens and the benefits of the changes in the energy system.
Thank you. I'm going to shoot over to Quinn. Anything you want to add to Tanya's response?
Yeah, I think this conversation is important both externally as equity is impacting the customers we serve, but also looking internally. Our industry has not acknowledged the inequities within the organizations that we all work within, and the the treatment of certain marginalized groups, even within our utilities and our organizations, it's not where it should be. We really need to start looking internally and think about and being intentional of how we manage ourselves.
Thank you. Maria, anything that you'd like to add?
Definitely. A couple of things that, as I look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think you need to look at this as not only focus internally, but also externally. I think it's definitely both, in both areas are as important and pivotal for a successful program for any company, and particularly for the energy company. I mean, and Tanya raised a great point. As we talk about delivering energy to the communities that we serve, it is really important that we embrace those communities, talk to them, have a dialogue. That means a two-way dialogue, right? You know, making sure that we're listening, that we are working with them to try to improve the systems that we have, but really bring them to have a seat at the table. Everyone should have a seat at the table in those discussions. You know, here at Dominion Energy, we started an environmental justice policy, and that is for every program that we have. Any new program that we have, anything that we're going to be working on, we make sure that everyone's sitting at the table having a discussion to be able to talk about what are the benefits, what are some areas where we need to work together to improve, and as Tanya said, what are the benefits that can come out of this, and how is the community going to be benefiting themselves? Then on the internal piece of it as well. The energy industry has been sort of long, and I'm relatively new to this industry, but many industries have long been, not very diverse. And I think the energy industry is one of those industries as well. Our company has worked really hard to improve that. It's a journey. We're still working on that. And I think, we just published our first DE&I report because we feel that transparency is going to be important. I mean, it's great to say things, but it's really good to look at the data, to have the data in front of you, and for, people that want to join our company to be able to, future employees and talent out there that, as right now the talent war, pretty much, because that's what it is it's tough. So we want to give our future employees the information that they need to make those decisions. So we published our report actually November 19th, our first report, and we're very excited to be able to tell the world our story and the journey that we've been in, which has been ongoing, and it will continue.
Mm-hmm. And I like the point that it's ongoing and it's a journey, because what's going to happen is as we learn things on a daily basis, hourly basis, things are going to change, and we're going to have to consistently learn and change and grow and continue the walk. So I appreciate you sharing that. Danny, did you have anything that you wanted to add as it relates to why this work is important?
Sure. I just definitely echo everything that my fellow panelists said. Again, I want to appreciate that this conversation is being conducted through the lens of energy justice, because for me, that is really what drives me in my work. And so like the three components of that being the social participation in the energy sector and the energy industry. So our clients and our constituents or customers, the economic side of that. So what does our workforce development look like? Who is actually participating? Who's at the table? And then again, like Tanya said, just kind of the recognition of the impacts on various communities based on environmental racism, based on so many factors that have placed people in harm's way because of the allowance of other people to thrive. So I think that's really important to recognize. And then the other thing that I would just bring up is just how impactful the energy sector is on every piece of our health and well-being. So it is really something that's dynamic, and it's not just turning our lights on and turning them off. It is a matter of people's ability to breathe healthily, people's ability to store food and insulin, people's ability, you know, to connect to education and to our offices like across the world. You know, like the way that our industries are transforming is so much online, and this is, you know, people's actual ability to work from home and be educated from home. And so I think that that's something that's really unique in the energy industry, is just the fact that it fosters the health of so many parts of us as human beings.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I do want to just add that it was asked in the chat if Maria could share the link to the report that she was referencing that Dominion put out on November 19th, and she has shared that link in there. I also want to just salute all of you for not, because this is where it gets very offensive. When people say, you know, the bottom line of DEI work, first of all, if it's really going to get to your bottom line, and that's what's going to make you do to be much more diverse and inclusive and equitable and just in the work that you're doing, maybe you shouldn't be doing any work, because it's really about not having people excluded and keeping people engaged. One of the things that before we started the webinar live, the panelists were talking, and one of the things that Maria brought up was learning terminologies that are not offensive or that really are the best terms to classify folks if people need to be classified. This is a little bit of a reach, but one of the things that has consistently been problematic for me in doing this work for the past 8 years now is utilities and other companies will put out there hard to reach communities. Who are they hard to reach? I mean, that's some communities are hard to reach for me. Like, it's hard for me to reach white communities because I'm a Black man and I don't particularly live in a white community. So saying things like that can be highly offensive and not well phrased for people to receive in a more solution-based way. And so I say that to set up Quinn. Quinn, I'm coming to you. Because you are a consultant that works with various folks. You've worked with various utilities, implementers, and I want to hear from you. What have you seen as some best practices in responses to some of the negative perceptions of the industry? What are you seeing as some things to respond to that work?
Yeah, hard to reach is a term that I no longer subscribe to. You will not hear me using that term and talking about communities that are not able to fully engage with our programs. I think we need to reframe that term entirely and take the burden back on ourselves.
Right.
We have not done what we need to do as deliverers of services for those communities. We have not provided a message, a method, a channel, an incentive, whatever it may be in your program that appropriately resonates with that community. You cannot call a community hard to reach because you did not put collateral in a language they understand. I think that is putting the burden on the folks that are only trying to participate in your program. I think there's many other terms we really need to reframe. Underrepresented, underserved, all of these terms tend to put more of the burden on the folks that are oftentimes underinvested, that for many, many years we haven't invested in those communities, thus they find themselves in the position they are in today. And even reframing how we call people, people are not low income. There are people that have a low income. People are not disabled. It's people that have some type of limit in their ability. And all of those words do have impacts on how we engage with people. It also has impacts on how folks want to engage with us. I'm not sure if any of you would like to participate in a program that's called low income weatherization. That just doesn't resonate with people and likely isn't something that people would gravitate to. So we really have to be careful with our words and how we refer to people. And one last one that might be a bit of a trigger for people, but calling folks people of color doesn't mean a whole lot. I'm Black, and I'm okay with you calling me Black. And if you want to target Black people, I think you should target Black people and recognize that there's a lot of different people that are included in people of color that likely have very different needs and reasons for participating or not participating in your programs.
Okay, Quinn. Pow, 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 pow. Before we started, Maria made a very similar comment about the terminology Latinx, and this is my perspective. Ask me, as we do with pronouns, ask me what my classification is, if I have one. Do not just automatically make an assumption, do not automatically lump, because some people don't like the terminology Black, some people like African American, some people do like people of color. And I would kind of lean towards you, Quinn, where terms like people of color dilutes opportunity, particularly when we talk about diverse companies, businesses. I remember I was at a workshop a few years ago and it was about diversity and the subject came up. Well, I feel like, I'm going to say this, a white man said, I feel like there's a ranking for diverse groups. So this is a higher rank than this group. And I was just like, how ignorant can one be to first think that, but then say that? But I feel like the terminology diversity is also dilutes the work, because if you're trying to get Black people, say I need more African American people or Black people, you're trying to get people who are Latino or Hispanic or whatever the term that people want to use, if you're trying to get people who are Native American, if you're trying to get them, say that. Don't say we need a diverse group of people. Look at your table and look at what's not represented and try to invite them on. I'm going to, Quinn, you kind of, I want to ask Tanya, because Tanya, you represent an agency, Advancing White Anti-Racism Education. First of all, when I saw this, I did a cartwheel because I saw something you wrote that white people should not expect any person or persons of a minority group, people of color, what have you, I'm sorry, Quinn, to educate them on what they need to do. What are you doing? What are you doing as white people to become better people? And I got some good questions over here that I'm going to get to in the chat, but I wanted to pivot to Tanya about this because, yeah, white people, yeah, talk about that a little bit.
Well, as you folks on this call, I'm sure well know, it's very easy for white people to overlook the existence of even these things that we're talking about, right? They don't experience the same often type of feeling misrepresented in the way that someone is talking about them. I know there are also instances, particularly around these, what can be uncomfortable conversations about race, where white people will say, you're lumping me in with racists and I'm not a racist. So I guess in a sense, we all can experience this in some fashion. But what we try to talk about in Aware is, and I should say this about terminology comes up a ton.
All the time.
Within, when we have in white-only spaces to talk about anti-racism, a big concern that comes up is, I don't know what to say. When I say this, it offends people. When I say this, it offends people. So, and can for some people say, well, I'll just throw my hands up then and say, there's nothing I can do because no matter what I do, someone is taking offense. And what we respond to that with is, if you are willing to contribute, or what you should do is understand you don't want to harm others, that we go in with the intention of we want to be open and not intentionally harm others. And to do that, we have to be open to the feedback and the real experiences that other people have. And that's across the board, but particularly important in this space. So if you go in and call someone Black and they say, I prefer African American, then you say, that person prefers African American. And just being open to understanding all of the unique ways that people prefer to present themselves or to be identified. And again, understanding what is offensive so that we can be part of, and I use inclusion in this sense, not in the maybe race or class sense, but more in the human sense of all of our destinies are essentially tied together. So understanding that, treat others the way that you would want to be treated. And that includes, again, some understanding that you will step in it in the sense of offending someone in the way that you speak, but that doesn't mean that you stop, right? You just understand that that is a unique situation. And can I real quick, Scott?
Yes.
I was supposed to do this up front and it was very clear and I failed to, so I'm sorry to inject it here. But what I'm representing today is not representative of what NARUC, my employer. I never speak on their behalf. I work there and they are doing great things in equity that I hope to talk about. But I just need to make sure that that is part of our discussion today, that what I am saying is not their position as an organization. So sorry.
No problem. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I want to, you're welcome. And thank you for your input there. I want to acknowledge two things that I see in the chat. One is going back to the initial question about the importance of DEI. And I'm paraphrasing, one person said that they think the importance really is about creating an atmosphere that is accepting and comfortable for people, setting it up before you even have them. So let's say right now my company does all look the same, but I'm changing what I want my company to look like. So I have to prepare for folks who don't look like us, who not similar to us, to come in and be successful and work in that space. And that's a huge part of the DEIJ work. And I do think that is very important. And we're going to get to some things that people can do and what you can do and what people have done to make that happen. The other thing that this question here is a good one. The question is, how do you work with people who don't see diversity, equity, and inclusion as a real issue within the energy sector? First of all, I don't know, because I don't know how they could see it not as a real issue. But I'm going to move on. How do you have these conversations with people who would like to pretend that they aren't important to them? Anybody want to tackle that? Because if I tackle it, I might get fired today. So that's a joke. So anybody want to tackle that? I'm going to go to Danny first.
Okay, I'm scared. Okay, so I'm laughing with you because it's true. At this point, there are things that we know are reality. We understand now that so many of the barriers that people experience, they're not because of them as individuals, they're because of the way that our systems have been created from when they were first developed. And those systems, including our energy system, were meant for some people to thrive, some people to survive, and other people, like when we were speaking earlier about environmental racism, some people's health and well-being are sacrificed. Their own individual health and well-being, the same for their communities, and as well as the land that they have historically lived on. So at this point, I think that we recognize, and in many different businesses and sectors recognize, that there are these systemic inequalities and inequities that exceed far beyond people's individual ability to participate in a program, or people's individual choices that they're making. So the issue is there, and I think that it's really important that a company, if we're talking from like a business perspective, has a really clear purpose and mission that says that, what I would like to see is organizations recognizing the ways that they have potentially excluded people from being able to participate in whatever their offerings might be. And when that happens, you are able to move forward. It's actually pretty much what Tanya was saying, is you recognize the harm that's been done, and you do what you need to do in collaboration with the people who have been harmed to move forward and actually establish something that is going to be successful for the different communities that people are living in. My ultimate thing, which I am almost nervous to say, is you're not going to get everybody. It's just at the end of the day, everybody has different opinions. People have different upbringings that make it really difficult to see that idea of systemic oppression, systemic racism, institutional racism. It's like, it can be a really difficult topic for people to grasp, because we have been taught throughout our lives to recognize our own circumstances as our own because of a decision we made when we were 20 years old, when we were 30 years old, a bad investment, a poor, job choice, whatever it might be. We still really lean on those individual decisions that people make. And so it just is not going to happen at the pace that we need it to happen to get every single person on board. And that's why I think it's important that a company has that mission and has a very clear view of what they're intending from their employees, so that when people are not in alignment with it, what we can say is, and Quinn said this earlier as well, we're just not doing the best job we can do if we're not including everybody. I always say this, like, if we are leaving people out, whether it is BIPOC people, Indigenous people, people who are immigrants, people with disabilities, queer people, if we're leaving people out, I'm just not that impressed, honestly. Like, we might be doing good work for some people, but for me, that's not the qualification of success. The qualification of success is that a system can work for everybody, not just for some people. So if we are defining our success in that way, hopefully the rest comes with it. And we have that very clear metric of what we're aiming for. And it's not just supporting the people who have been historically served by various institutions or systems.
Very well said. And it's very difficult to create an inclusive system when socially our society has been set up to be exclusive, hierarchical, to, I'm better, you're less. And when you have these caste systems that are set up, it's very difficult to create inclusivity within that. And I think that is a part of the buck that we're seeing in companies in our country and on the globe right now. Is it's very difficult to say you want to be inclusive when for some reason that exclusion equates to people as power for whatever reason, which isn't always the truth. And so completely agree with you there. I want to go back. Somebody put in the chat, this is so hot already. Someone put in the chat, going back to terminology, from a standpoint, is it acceptable for utilities to say communities that we really don't reach? I'm not going to be the expert on terminology that, I could be, terminology that works for, that's not offensive to folks, but I think people just need to be honest about what they're trying to do and who they're trying to reach, and to include those people and reach them. You don't have a problem, utilities, in reaching folks or anybody when you're giving them a bill. They're paying their bill every month. So how are they hard to reach? If they're receiving your service, they're getting the bill, it's a way to do it. So there are ways that I think it can happen. And I'm going to shoot to Maria because she is with the utility. Are there things that Dominion, is that something that you all have started to address or looked at, in terms of terminology on how you reach customers that may not have been participating at levels that you would like in the past? Have you all had that discussion, and what does that look like?
Yeah, definitely. And we've been working with communities for a long time. Our company has been around for 100+ years. It's been in different iterations in the sense of we weren't always what we are today. But we have worked very hard to have a good relationship with the communities that we serve. So we have programs across our footprint that serve all customers. The customers that are in need of assistance, we have programs like Energy Share that helps with weatherization, that help with bill assistance. We have, programs in, Ohio for around our gas business as well for heating. So we work very closely, not only with the communities, but we work with the states to make sure that if there are needs in the community, that there are individuals that are in need, that we're there to support them. So we have addressed that. We, particularly around COVID in Virginia, I'm going to use that as, as an example. I mean, we forgave arrears, for a lot of our customers that weren't able to pay due to the loss of employment or just what was happening due to the pandemic. So I think, as a company, we have made a tremendous effort to make sure that we hear from communities, that we understand the challenges, and that we are there to address them. But when the question, I think, on the terminology also in an internal perspective that we were talking about, how do you address, even your own employees that have to figure out what is DEI, like what is in it for me. And I think, we have put a lot of work in educating our employees, in really letting them know that it's all, DEI has been proven. There's been many, many studies that really talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion helps the business, that helps us be a better company. Why? Because it brings innovation, it brings different perspectives, it brings people that look at things in a different way. So embracing that to really give them, this is why this is important. But also it's because it's the right thing to do. I mean, we live in a country that is incredibly diverse. I'm Hispanic. There's 60 plus million Hispanics in this country. There are, if you look at the United States, we're made up of people from so many different places with so many different backgrounds. So embracing that is positive. I mean, really being able to look at, people's differences and what they bring to the table, just having a completely different point of view is actually a good thing, so really educating people to, embrace that as a positive instead of thinking, we're different. I'm not really sure how to address it. It's actually interesting. I always find that when I go to an event or I meet someone new, I'm asking questions, I want to make sure, what are those common threads that we have so we can really start a great conversation. And I think people need to feel more comfortable with, having those conversations and not feel like you're going to make a mistake because it's actually, this is the way that people communicate. So I think it's really sort of changing the approach and looking at DEI and inclusion as, it's something that brings so much positive that we should embrace it.
Thank you. I agree. Quinn has a comment that she wants to share.
Yeah, just in terms of the terminology and the question in the chat, I think anytime you acknowledge the utilities role in a certain group's participation or lack of in a program is good. When you have any statement that acknowledges that the utility played a role, or the systems or the program or the legislature or the regulatory environment, all of these things probably play a role in why certain groups are not fully able to engage in programs. And I think that carries over to this idea of folks that may not think DEI is important in energy, is that sometimes the constraints in which we work within our regulatory environment hasn't prioritized diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so as an industry, we're often conflicted with how do we balance this very important aspect of including people with cost effectiveness and the different other factors that dictate how we're able to implement our program. So it really becomes a balance and an intentional push that we have to make to include DEI in the way we do our business.
That's a really, really good point. And the first thing that I thought about as it relates to it is, this is what we're trying to do externally as a company. How or who do we have representing those areas or those people internally? And are they at the table to help barter or bridge that gap or fill us in? Because that is a key component. how do we do it? How do we communicate? And it's really about, to Maria's point, to your point, Quinn, and actually, Danny and Tanya, you've said this as well. It's really about the communication piece. And I want to really start there as we talk about best practices and things that we're able to do. It is about communication. And to what Maria was saying, it's more about our similarities than our differences, because there's so many more similarities than there are differences, and we just have to get over the differences, and we do that by communicating. So this is my first point that I'm going to make about a best practice. You have to let people know in your work environment, in a safe environment, in a respectful way that's not fueled with emotion, when something may have been offensive to you or you prefer something different. I make it a practice to not speak for other people. I can speak for me. This was offensive to me. This offended me. I'm a little scary about what you're talking about. And I try to do it as diplomatic, and that is, trust me, very difficult for me because I'm not a diplomatic person, but I try to do that. If I know I can't really say it to them, I do it in writing because I might get upset, but you have to let people know when it's appropriate so that they're learning and that you're learning. And in doing that, you have to be open and also give them time to be open to receive, because it may not be immediate, but it will happen and change can follow. You have to say things to people. You know, the comment in the chat earlier, if you are a person and you're in the majority, I don't care if it's all women and it's one man, I don't care if it's all white people and it's one person that is not white, and something is coming up and you know it's not right, that's when you have an opportunity to speak up, because you can have so much more weight on that majority group than someone that is in the minority group in that space to have to say it. And you have to remember that it's about honesty with yourself and bravery that really have to connect to the work that you're doing. I do want to go to Danny on any best practices or things that you've seen that ICF is doing, or work that you've seen in the space that is working for folks, that is changing the needle around DEI and justice.
So first of all, just to respond to what you're saying, I definitely agree with what you're saying fundamentally in terms of it. You know, we do have our own power. You know, I really speak about power a lot. I think in terms of thinking about equity, justice, that this idea of a power shift, you know, that who's at the table, who has the power to make decisions, that is really what that is all about. You have to recognize who has power, and when, and then how we can shift it in a way that is actually serving like the people that need to have the decisions to make, or the power to make decisions within their communities. So that's one thing. I think that it's true that as individuals, we always hold a level of that power. I also think it can be amplified if the companies that we work for don't rely on us as individuals to be making statements like that, to be developing a culture where we are speaking out, where we're being inquisitive, where we're wondering about people's lived experiences and how we can support them, and say, you know, it's one thing to say or recognize that something that someone said was like, okay, that was not okay. It's another to actually be in an environment that fosters safety, and you speaking out. And especially if you are as part of other groups that, you know, you may not have that safety, and companies should never rely on employees solely without developing that culture in some capacity. So I think that maybe speaks to a best practice there, is to always make sure that we're not just like forcing our employees to go out on a limb, that we are from the core, from the root of what this company stands for. It's clear that stuff is not going to fly. And if you're going to say something like that, you know, people may do it on accident or out of ignorance. It's also about leaving space for learning and healing.
Right.
And it's okay to have conversations. One of my biggest mentors that I have, I literally started my relationship with her because she said something offensive to me that she didn't recognize was offensive. And that was because of her own lived experience as a multiracial person. And what offended me was my lived experience as a multiracial person. And it wasn't until we like actually sat down and had a conversation where I was like, not trying to be, I don't know, I was just really not trying to be there with her. But then at the end of the day, like she has literally opened so many doors for me. And that's not going to be every situation. But again, it's like, when I think about best practices, I do think about learning spaces, healing spaces, spaces that are exclusive to Black, Indigenous, and people of color, or to LGBTQ people. Something that I think is pretty normalized at this point is, you know, creating affinity groups. ICF has done that, and it's been really impactful for me as an employee. And I think that when you take it to the next level of sharing, you know, what our individual experiences are within our identities and our stacked identities in terms of like intersectionality, me as a queer, multiracial, Indigenous woman, like what does that bring to the space that's unique, then we can then actually think about, well, how do we actually translate that, not just to what's happening internal to our workspace, but how do we take my particular lived experiences and what I know and translate that into our program delivery, and having those conversations that you know we're speaking to earlier with different community members, with creating safe spaces that show that we are not just, you know, trying to make money, but we're really trying to build resilient communities and recognize the ways that we can actually be vehicles for change within our companies and the communities that we're serving. Those were some best practices.
I have to say, I really want to be your friend right now. You made a very great point, because what typically happens when someone, and I'm speaking for Scott, when someone pisses me off or offends me, I don't want to deal with them anymore. And you did a very good spin on what started your relationship with this person that's one of your greatest mentors at this point, is you were offended by something they said. And so it opened up a space for you to learn from them, for you to teach them. And that is really how this can change from your individual life and to your work that you do corporately. Is how do I impact somebody else? How do they impact me? And going back to, you have to be open, they have to be open, and you have to use that. That is, I'm very glad that you started with that, because I'm actually the person that's like, you make me mad, leave me alone, I'm done with you. How do I become a better person? By really trying to let you understand me and me understand you. And I've learned that in so many areas of my life. So why I've not infused it is a whole nother thing. And so I will make this disclaimer here. You're consistently learning on this journey to become better, to be much more inclusive, because we are all products of our society. We don't know that we have all of these biases that we may have, and we're operating in them, and we don't know that we're operating in them, but we have to do it. The other piece that you said, Danny, that was staggering for me in such a good way, is about the power piece. And so I operate in power because I do. That's who I am. Everybody doesn't operate like that. So everybody can't go in a space and feel safe at any point to say that they've been offended by something. And so there has to be other ways to connect and to share that information. And as powerful as I feel on a daily basis, and not in a workspace, just as a person, I feel powerful. I had to share in a work environment where I was the only person of color, with other folks being majority men, that I was offended because they tried to dethrone me, if you will, with their white privilege. And for me to have to say it in a space, like, I it was a bad day. I was like, this is bad, but I had to do it. And I didn't feel powerful because I was ashamed to have to do it. So there's spaces where this happens with everyone, and it's a growth and something that you have to do. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us. I want to go back to best practices. And in your intro, Maria, you talked about your DEI report. What is the intent for a report? Why is it important for people to know what is happening? And is it important externally? Is it internally? Talk a little bit about why that's something that Dominion felt was important to do.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So for several reasons, I mean, our D&I program is tied to our core mission as a company, the values that we have as a company, for one. Two, I would say it would be, it's important both for our external audiences. We talked a lot about communities that we serve, about the communities that we're in, and for the communities that we're in to learn the work that we have been doing. What we have been doing as a company, the priority that we put on D&I in everything we do. D&I is in every single aspect of our business. From
how so? Talk a little bit about what that looks like.
So I'm going to give you an example, and we mentioned it on the report. We have the Energy Share program. That is a program to make sure that we have, we provide equity to the people that might not be able to, either pay their bills or have weatherization in their homes. So providing that level of equity. Then, we have other programs like our underground program that is our strategic underground program, which we made an effort to make sure that as we look at some communities, we are making sure that the work that we're doing gets to those communities, so that when we go, that the communities that are, and I don't like to say something, and we discussed this, underrepresented, are taken care of. So. So that's another initiative we have. We have another initiative to serve the communities around rural broadband, making sure that there is broadband, which is something that in COVID was very important. A lot of communities didn't have Wi-Fi accessibility for kids that were going to school virtually. So that's something that we have been working on, particularly here in Virginia. To really be able to get, working very closely with cell providers to be able to expand broadband in areas that currently we don't have. So those are some of the efforts to deal with, to make sure that we are listening to the communities, recognizing what their needs are, and the report really talks about that. Additionally, on the internal side, I mean, there is, we have workforce. We have a workforce that, has to represent the communities that we serve. And the report talks about data. It gives transparency made up of a workforce. So that's something positive. The progress we have made through the years and the progress that we continue to make. It also gives the full story to our employees, making sure that our employees recognize that we are working on it. This is not a sprint. This is a marathon, and it's going to continue. And we're going to be evolving as a company as we continue this D&I journey. But as we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's important that we think about it in everything we do. When we work with our customers, when we work in our communities, when we, to retain talent and to actually also hire great talent that's out there in all the communities, and that we're being inclusive and we're not leaving anyone out. And I think for me, that is so important, both internally and externally, be able to have everyone sit at the table and really have a conversation. What are we doing? How does it, affect the communities that we serve? And how do we work together to make it happen? And on an internal perspective, we have ERGs. We have 8 ERGs that represent, various communities. an employee resource group. So these employee resource groups are representative of, we have OLA, which represents Hispanics. We have AARG, which represents our African-American Black employees. And any employee can join. You don't have to be from that community. And that really gives that opportunity to learn about these different communities, LGBTQ+, our diversibility RG, that is our employees with disabilities. And it really gives employees an opportunity to learn about one another. So as you discuss the differences or what make us different and unique, these are some of the vehicles where employees can learn and feel a bit more comfortable as they talk to each other. So, that culture of inclusion is incredibly important to be able to bring your whole self to work. I mean, I'm a Hispanic American. I have an accent and I love my accent, and I'm not going to change that. So this is who I am. And I want to come to work every day with my accent, and hopefully everyone understands me. But
take your accent off, Maria. Take it off.
Never going to take it off. I love it. But we want to come into work every day feeling like we can, and that you're going to be accepted. And we, and I'm very, very proud for Dominion Energy's, culture of inclusion, because, it's great to come to work and feel good about yourself and the work that you do.
So we have about 4 minutes left. I cannot believe how fast this went. That's why I was telling the panelists earlier, this might end up being a part 2 at some point, because we have a question in here now about, did we talk about DEI financing, or DEI as relates to financing for building owners or developers? We have not. But again, to the space, DEI is important in all of these things, and I am keeping these. And I'm just going to say, when we do a part 2, we will address these things. Someone also asked, as a sidebar in here, so I'm going to address it. They heard about a program that we do, and it is our DTE Energy Efficiency Assistance Program that SEEL administers in partnership with ICF, where we have funds to prevent walkaways. And so that is a program. They wanted to know who to reach out to. You can reach out directly to me, give you that information for that, and then direct you to that program and give you tips. But with the last few minutes left, I'm going to go to each person, and I really want you to talk about one thing in 30 seconds that you think people can do individually to help move the needle on DEI for themselves and in their workspace. So I'm going to start with Tanya.
You won't be surprised to hear I'm going to target my suggestion at the white folks participating. And I think
yeah, do it.
How? I think it is engage yourself in difficult discussions, seek out intentionally to explore your own journey with race. I commend looking for a white only program in addition to diverse programs, because you just will learn more about yourself in that space. And it's the internal work for all of us, but particularly I think for white folks to explore and really understand these issues and the impacts more fully.
Thank you. Quinn, you knew I was coming to you next.
Yeah, you have an order here, Scott, that I think I've got going. And I think the biggest takeaway, and perhaps what we can do, is know that equity doesn't happen by chance. If we aren't intentionally pushing towards equitable outcomes, we are likely introducing inequities in everything we do. And to know where to start, you need to know where you are. Collect data on yourself. Where are you at on your own journey? What do you need to learn about yourself, your own culture? Collect information on your organization. What do the demographics of your organization look like? Who's leaving faster than others? And start addressing those issues. And look at the data in your programs. Who's participating, who's not, and why? Talk to the communities that you want to serve and find out how to best meet their needs where they are.
Thank you. Maria, 30 seconds, y'all, because
I
we're
think
almost out of time.
30 seconds. So Quinn said a lot of it. That's what we did our report. And I think listen, learn, educate, be inclusive. Don't leave everyone has to be sitting at the table, and try to, really measure yourself and find areas where you can do better.
Thank you. And last but not least, Danny.
Yes, all of what was said before. And I'm just going to say, like, be creative and really just push the envelope, really never settle for what we already know, what we've already done. Recognize that there are, power structures at play, inequities at play. And so just to always question, am I being inclusive enough? Am I being thoughtful enough with my interactions with people, as well as the programs that we're actually developing for our customers? So just always think ahead, think beyond what we're seeing right in front of your face.
Thank you so much, everyone. People asked earlier, was this recorded? All of our webinars for the year are on our website. This one was recorded. It will be on our website by next week. I want to thank our panelists, Tanya, Danny, Quinn, and Maria. I appreciate you so much. I will be reaching back out because I do think we need to do something else. It's so much stuff we didn't even get into. I knew that was going to happen in this conversation. The wealth of insight that the four of you bring is amazing. And I've learned so much in this hour, which I was expecting to, and hopefully this was beneficial to you as well as to everyone that participating. People are giving all types of very helpful comments in the chat about what is happening. So thank you so much, everyone. And from SEEL, we want to thank you and look out for our 2022 webinar series, which will be coming out with a variety of topics and things to help as we move the industry to a much more equitable, inclusive, diverse, and just space. Thanks, everybody. Have a great one.